Welcome to Talk Tech with Tiff, the New York edition, where I am sitting down with industry professionals to hear about their career journeys and current roles. I created this series to hear from people who are established in the tech industry so that we can all learn what these individuals do in their day-to-day jobs and the type of opportunities out there. Hi, Brian. How are you today?
Great. Awesome weather.
I know. It's kind of gray, rainy.
It turned out good.
I know.
Started raining. Now it's good.
Tomorrow, too, it's supposed to be really sunny, I hear.
I know, yeah. So it's the weekend's, coming together.
I agree. Tomorrow, we usually come to New York and always have a very tight packed schedule, right? Try and fit everything in. But tomorrow, we decided to take the day and just walk around. So I'm happy that the weather is cooperating with my schedule.
I know. It could have been rain.
I know. Well, I'm very happy to have you here today. I've been doing a lot of creeping on you leading up to this. Going through your LinkedIn, and I'm very inspired. You've held a lot of interesting titles, and even as we were just talking off camera, you have some really interesting experiences, and I'm really looking forward to diving into those. But can you tell me about yourself?
Sure. Engineering leader, 25 years in technology. Sounds scary every time I say it, but I graduated with a CS degree in 98. And the first 8 years of my career, I was a Java developer, rising in seniority from a junior to a senior to a tech lead. Around 05 to 2010, I was a player coach manager, managing 7 to 12 person teams, coding, but also managing. And 2010 is really where my engineering leadership career started. 2010 is where I worked at Condé Nast in media, entertainment, fashion. And from 2010 to 2015, I had grown the department and relaunched several of the digital products for tablet, mobile, web. And then from 2015 to 2020, I was at Major League Soccer. And Major League Soccer was really a special place because, one, it's a sports industry. Their product is the game of soccer. And my job was to work with product, reassemble a team, and launch a appropriate digital product on mobile, connected television, web that really made sense next to this physical game of soccer. And it was really an awesome experience. I wasn't really a soccer guy, but I became one during then. And just being in a totally different industry was definitely a learning experience. 2020 was another inflection point, and non-coincidentally, I had made a career change because that was when COVID started.
Yes.
And so there I went and started getting into my interests deeper with blockchain, crypto, and I started a career in crypto. And since then, I've been in the blockchain crypto industry, working for various companies, but the last 6 months I've been a management consultant, fractional CTO, and advisor for various software companies.
Both Web3 and Web2,
yes,
right?
both Web3 and Web2, early stage, and helping them sort of get their product out there.
That's really interesting. I like how your career journey is, it's funny because in some of these conversations we've been really hitting on that tech impacts every industry.
Yeah.
And your career journey, from early on really is a good example of that, working with Condé Nast, media. I know Condé Nast is not just fashion, but a huge part of it, one area of it is, right? And then Major League Sports, being the sports industry.
Yeah.
And then now to working with Web3 and what that entails.
Yeah.
But going back to you said you started in computer science in 98, right?
Yeah. 94, that's when I got into college. And then I didn't actually go to college initially for computer science.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'll try to keep the Wayback Machine commentary short, but in 94, computers and the internet were not ubiquitous in 1994. And I went in undecided. I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I did know I liked problem solving, and I did know that I liked really this idea of structured logic. And so I started out actually in philosophy. Then I got into religion, Eastern religion. I was
Okay.
studying Eastern religion. And then I got into math.
Okay.
This is my first year. And then at the end of my first year, beginning my second year, my sophomore year, that's when I found computer science. So I actually got into computer science not because there were no websites a lot.
Yeah.
There were no computers. People didn't really have a lot of computers. But I got into it because it was a really interesting application of problem solving.
Wow. When you got into, because of exactly what you just said, it wasn't like it is today as far as the internet and computers. What was, and this is a very kind of silly question, but like, what was the main, when you were studying computer science, were you like, after I graduate, this is what I want to do with it?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question because, when we were, those of us in the mid-90s to late 90s that were in computer science, what we envisioned doing, what we thought the opportunities was really limited. It was, okay, we'll work at Microsoft, Oracle, help with databases, IBM, help with services. But it was really like a small set of things. Amazon didn't really exist.
Yeah.
So it was really more like, I guess I'm going to be a programmer, and I guess I'm going to help, be a part of some really large sort of platform or machine.
Yes.
And I'm going to own this one class or set of functions. So that's what we thought.
Yeah.
And that was really fun.
Yeah.
But it when I graduated in that 4 years from 94 to 98, things changed. And so things started opening up. And my first job was at Motorola in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know what to expect.
Yeah.
Because it was changing so fast.
It was, you were really after graduating, that was really around the internet boom, like that bubble,
Yeah,
the early
it was.
2000s. Things
was.
were changing so quickly.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because I'm sure even subconsciously, the skills and being comfortable with things changing so quickly has maybe helped you with the environment of Web3 that's continuing to evolve and grow.
Yeah.
Kind of like seeing it all over again, would you say?
Yeah.
Or?
Well, I think I'm lucky because my vantage point has been such that I saw the start of Web 1. Mm-hmm. Let's call it Web 1 static websites.
Yeah.
Web 1 go to Web 2.
Yeah.
Let's call it rich interaction. And Web 2 to Web 3.
Yeah.
And so I think what I'm lucky, in my career for is that I've gained this innate adaptability.
Yes. 100%.
And so I'm used to sort of building on a swamp and knowing that, this might change or might go away. And so we have to keep thinking, well, what could be next?
Exactly. And you're also used to seeing when these, from Web 1 to Web 2, this period of time where it's not fully adapted yet to, say, everyone, the general public and whatnot, but seeing how it's just, I'm sure you can kind of see ahead or look ahead to where it will be.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
That's very interesting. I want to talk more about what you're currently doing, but before we get there, a lot of listeners on here are either software engineers or in that technical space, or want to get into it. And one question that I think comes up just in conversation is, when we think of, we're going down this path of, okay, I graduated from computer science, I became a software engineer, then I will become a manager, and then continue up to VP, which title you've held for many roles. What would you say for someone who wants to go down that path to expect, in the sense of, when you're holding a higher up title, do you still code as much, or what does that look like compared to when you were? Yeah.
Okay. So that's okay. Good question. So let me first start out by saying that, the manager track in an engineer's career isn't always necessary for progress. That's the first. This is a common theme with a lot of the engineers in my teams, to equate career progress with attaining some form of authority. Progress can occur as an individual contributor in terms of the scope of your work, the complexity, the application, the part of the stack you're on. So the first thing I always sort of talk to engineers about is this something you truly want to do? And then we'll talk about, like, what is this?
Yeah.
What is management? Right.
Yeah.
So let's define that first and just think about it. Be a little conscious, because what I do know is that some folks say, well, the thing I do know is I want to move up in my career.
Yeah.
And so that means I must be a manager. And so first I like to take a pause on that and kind of reflect and just revisit that sort of presumption. Yeah. Okay. But for those that do want to go into management, I'll also say this: try it before you buy it.
Ah.
So what does that mean? Well, there's lots of opportunities
Yes.
that are around you, and that your boss should match you up with, where you can test drive. So examples could be a tech lead, team lead, or even for a small project, be like, I'll coordinate, I'll own that, I'll set it up in my project management platform or tool and make the tickets. And
Yes.
so try that first, because it'll give you a feel for what your path is. Now let's get back to your question. So for those that have tried it, they like it, I'm pretty sure this is what I want to do, what can I expect? Well, the answer there is, it depends. It depends on the size of your company. It depends on how engineering management is defined. So in some companies, engineering management is defined as leaning heavily on resource management and people skills. In some places, engineering management is like 50-50, sliding scale. So that's another important thing. And that's something to understand at your company or a company that you're looking into, and ask that question. Now, what I've seen more or less, let's say across companies that are below 100, maybe 100 to 200, engineering management is a combination of highly technical, hands-on, but probably like less than 50, maxing at 50%. So you are still coding, but you're not coding a lot. Why? Well, because your primary goal is to achieve success for the team. And so if you're going to prioritize things, you want to make sure your team succeeds before you finish writing your function.
Exactly.
Right? And then consequently, your project shouldn't put you in a critical path where you need to make this thing as a manager completed, checked in, and deployed, at this time. So yes, there is development, but oftentimes it's at a lower priority, at a lower percentage.
That makes sense, because at the end of the day, like you mentioned, one of your main goals is to help your team, or maybe your main goal, depending on your company, is to help your team succeed. And if your full focus is developing new features, then you can't also be managing a team on top of that.
True, but the other things to consider is, I said that it depends on the company size. That
True,
matters, right?
yes.
So that's an important thing. The other thing to think about is it depends on the industry you're in. And then it depends on the level of management you are at. So management, just like engineering, has, let's say, levels. And as you manage larger and larger teams, and your management seniority increases, also your likelihood of coding might decrease. Therefore, if you need to stay, cognizant of technological trends, it is kind of on you as a manager to actually code outside of work.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That was one of the questions I had for you, actually, was around how do you do that?
You got to do it at home. And that's when now it's getting into like work-life balance. What do you do with your free time? Are you cool with coding on your free time? So, that's what it ends up being. So that's the thing that goes back to the discussion I have with engineers who are considering this path. Because if you like coding all the time, well then, management might work because you can still code at night. But if you really want to just be coding between 9 to 6, and you want to keep doing that, well then rethink, like what you're getting into. But you can always try, and I always think you should, because you don't know if you want to or if you can until you try.
Just take a test drive.
Yeah.
When you are coding outside of, when I know you're more consulting right now, but for the coding portion of it, would you recommend, and maybe it varies person to person, but for your own experience, would you do freelancing on the side, or would it be more so personal interest projects?
Good question. It's really whatever is at whatever opportunities are at your disposal. So here's an example. A lot of times, and this is the mind usually of an engineer, you'll have a repetitive task and you'll think, wow, you know what? Like, I just want to do something about that. And so that's a great opportunity to sort of learn something. So for me, I picked up Python because I have a massive MP3 collection, and it's like completely untagged, and the album art is not there. So I wrote a Python script. I learned Python by reading, my Apple music database and making calls to different services to find the album art for a given album, and then boom. And so if you have those kinds of personal needs, I definitely think it's the best place because then, if you don't get it done, then it's on you.
Exactly.
But if you're making a website for your aunt and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. I think those are, for me as well, that's the best is when I'm building something for myself that I actually can see a need for that will help me in the end, because then you're double motivated. You're learning new skills, continuing to keep your coding up to date if you're not doing it for 9 to 5, for example. But then also too, you're actually solving a problem.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes if I say I'm creating a project and it's more so to learn something new, but the project I'm creating doesn't actually solve a real world problem of my own or say someone else's, that is when I often fall off that project and it just kind of collects dust.
The key to really good work is finding an internal motivation to do that work. And so whatever that is, motivating you, there should be something, because then you'll produce your best work.
Exactly. I love that. And then for your role now, consulting for both Web 2 and Web 3 companies, what does that entail, moving from the VP of engineering to consulting side?
Yeah, it's really interesting because, on one hand, I've got a large department running meetings, doing one-on-ones, working with stakeholders, and now I'm in a world where it's really the purity of producing a product or a service and getting it across the finish line and taking a 360 view to sort of point out gaps that might be in the way, or how do we get this thing started. So really, to take a step back, what do I do? So I've got a handful of clients that need to take an idea to a proof of concept.
Okay.
Take a proof of concept to an MVP, or have an MVP out there and try to refine their current operations because it might be really costly in AWS, or they have a engineering team in offshore and they're unsure if they're operating effectively. And so I'll kind of come in at different life stages for an early stage startup and help them. So what that really means is either bootstrapping an effort. I work with founders like a CEO. I got this idea. I want to turn it into this. And then I'll oftentimes match them up with a agency that can do that kind of work.
Oh, I see.
And then, because I've got relationships with different agencies, and then we'll craft together like a project that can produce a proof of concept. And then with a proof of concept, then that's how you get funding.
The next step,
So so I'll do a lot of that. For some companies, they're kind of in motion and they already have something out there, and I might come in there and sort of be an observer and do what we call gap analysis.
Gap analysis.
So what does that mean? So that could mean like maybe you have a agile process.
Okay.
But I might sit in and be like, wow, if you did tweak your stand-ups to do this, or if you added a retro or did a demo, well, then stakeholders might get to see what you're making sooner versus later and give you feedback, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of times it's just tweaking things and producing more effective results just from small tweaks. So I do a lot of that.
Especially with startups that are, even proof of concept or in any stage that you just mentioned, they're moving and learning so quickly. So to have someone like yourself come in and be able to make those small tweaks, it has such a huge impact.
Yeah.
And do you like that? Are you enjoying this role more than, say, some of your previous ones where it's more...
I think this is sort of a life answer here. I enjoy everything that I do.
I love
what I'm doing at any point.
And
I try to find something, important and valuable in the things I do. And I try to do that, and even just banal moments. Sometimes I just try to take a break, like, wow, like this table is really cool, and I really appreciate the structure and the craftsmanship. So with work, I think it's just it's a lot of interesting things that are all different. I can say though that it really feels extremely fulfilling to have such a massive impact on a small company trying to produce something, and so there's definitely a different kind of experience with what I'm doing now.
Are you, and this is maybe be asking to be like, pick your favorite child, but do you prefer right now working with Web 2 or Web 3 companies? Not necessarily the companies, but the technologies. That
is a great question. Well, I'm just going to say that, I'm always chasing innovation.
Yeah.
So
Web3.
yeah, it's always and right now let's kind of just say what is Web3? Well, if you say Web3 is this concept of digital ownership, provable, verifiable digital ownership.
Yes.
That is achieved through decentralization.
Yeah.
Well, then you're really talking about a next level of computing, similar to when cloud computing got introduced. Right? It's very analogous. So in that, there's this primordial ooze phase of blockchain that is just so cool because like I'm looking at things and working on projects that are already morphing in months.
Oh my
because
goodness,
it's changing so fast.
So quickly. Yeah. And then how do you, as someone who's working with these companies, how do you keep up with it as it's changing so quickly?
You know, this is really, I think, a general question for most technologists. Like, how do you keep in touch with technical trends? Because there's so much out there. Well, you have to be really efficient and effective with how you consume information.
Yeah.
Like podcasts.
Yeah.
So what I do try to do is that I try to fill in moments.
Yeah.
Like driving a car or running with learning opportunities.
Yeah.
And so what that means is it ends up being lots of podcasts, lots of Medium. I subscribe to Medium. I download articles.
Yeah.
I use moments where I'm sitting on a subway and I'll just like read a new article on GPT-4.
Can you download Medium articles?
Sure. If you pay for it, you can download it and now you can organize them into lists.
That's really
and say,
interesting.
oh, I want to download all the lists on ChatGPT and how to use it best.
That's super useful.
That's a really good thing to do. And then another thing I'll do is really pick my favorite email content aggregators. Hacker News has one. Lots of people have. TLDR has a great one.
Love TLDR.
I'll give a shout out to TLDR.
Yes.
It's a really good way
I know.
to get information, and especially in Web3 and blockchain. I mean, things change by the day, and so that's how I'll usually get a lot of my information.
At the end of the day, it's more so. It seems like, and this is what I guess, with not only Web3, but tech in general, it's more so about being open to continue to learn and, evolve with tech. And through doing that by listening or reading through different platforms, than trying to be one step ahead of it at all times, because it's kind of impossible, would you say?
You kind of have to just be flexible and assume things will change and just... not get too comfortable.
Yeah. Yes.
That's really what it is. I had an engineer, at Major League Soccer, and he did something that I thought was so interesting, and I really learned from it. He had an IDE, what you code in, and everyone has an IDE they're coding there. This is my IDE. I love it.
Yeah.
But he would change it every year.
No.
And everyone was using this one IDE, and he changed it. I was trying to enforce a specific IDE also. It was really sort of a minor point of contention at first. But he was like, no, I already know how this works. I want to change it and just kind of break up how I work, because it rewires how I think about things.
100%.
And so that's a really great example of how, like, you can make little minute changes.
Yes.
And it's a little bit of a... sort of like a microshock to your brain to keep malleable.
Exactly. Wow. I'm going to actually steal that and try that, because I have I started with Symfony with, so PHP, what was it? Storm? PHP Storm? Yeah. That was, what was my first job was with that. But then since then, it's always been with VS Code for my IDE.
See, a lot of people, it is a great IDE, and people have landed there. Yeah. And it's funny because prior to VS Code, you had all these different ones. And I would say it's kind of like, oh man, like what could you do outside of VS Code? Yeah. But it's worth a check to see what's out there, try something new, and it's just a good way to sort of
keep fresh.
Yeah, it is.
And there's so many ways you could do that, but that's such a great example of changing something in your environment that it doesn't take a lot of effort to change, but it does take some time and to get familiar with it, and it's learning again, like rewiring your...
At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're always learning at every moment. And so what are little things you can do to do that? I always tell people this, because I also do martial arts. One thing I learned in martial arts is switch the hand, your dominant hand. So if you open your hand with your right, open your door, the door with your right hand.
Yeah.
Try with your left hand.
Try with your left.
If you comb with your right, just comb with your left
Yeah.
hand. So things like that,
Yeah.
like they're little micro shocks to sort of get you to sort of absorb things differently.
And I love that example because martial arts completely different than tech or career. I mean, some people's career, of course,
there you go.
but at the end of the day, I think that's one of the things that I really like about tech is that a lot of the skills that you build can be translated in so many other areas,
true.
like you just said.
Yeah, it's true.
Brian, if you were, to look back at your younger self, starting from, your days at Condé Nast, MLS, like what is some advice that you would give your younger self?
Well, actually, we just touched on it just earlier. Don't be comfortable. That's a mantra I probably have been practicing since
I love that.
my maybe mid-30s. Like, just don't be comfortable. Yeah. And what do I mean by that? Well, your growth usually happens outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, always, or usually.
And so I didn't really start thinking like that till my mid-30s. Oh, that would have been great if I started thinking like that in my teens.
Yeah.
You're a teenager or even in your 20s, like, oh, no, I got this. I know what's up. I know.
100%.
I like
have all
that
the time in the
brand.
world.
That's it. That's the only band that matters.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just don't be comfortable. And then, I think every older version of oneself wants to tell the younger one to save and invest more.
100%. Save and invest more. Get uncomfortable and continue to grow.
Yeah.
I love that. Brian, thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with me today. I'll link down your information below. And I really loved hearing your story. It's really inspiring to me. So thank you for your time.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.